Fundamentals of Banking and Finance, Module 1, Study Session 3, Types of Business Organization 2. The expected duration of this study session is 1 week. Introduction. In Study Session 2, we learned about 3 types of business organizations found in Nigeria. These included sole proprietorship, partnership, and private limited companies. In this study session, you will learn about the rest of the types of business organizations that could be found in Nigeria. They include the joint stock companies, public corporations, and cooperative societies. You will learn how they are being formed, financed, and managed in Nigeria. It is very interesting and will be of immense benefit to you, especially these days of mass unemployment that government is emphasizing on entrepreneurship development. Learning outcomes. At the end of this unit, you should be able to ascertain the formation of the basic business types, appreciate how the businesses obtain their finance, and mention the major advantages and disadvantages of each business type. Joint stock/public limited companies. A public limited company is a legal person or entity created by the association of a number of persons in accordance with the law for the purpose of a defined object. It must be established for a specific purpose, such as to engage in a named business, which of course must not be injurious to the society. Joint stock companies have been described as the association of capital rather than association of persons because the identities of the shareholders are irrelevant to the conduct of the business. The identity of the individual is lost because the company has perpetual succession, a distinctive name, and the right to sue and be sued in its own name. According to the Companies and Allied Matters Decree, any 7 or more persons associated for any lawful purpose may, by subscribing their names to a memorandum and articles of association and otherwise complying with the requirements of the decree in respect of registration, can incorporate a company. Formation. The steps in the formation of a joint stock/public limited companies are as follows. 1. The promoters devise a scheme of capitalization bearing in mind A. Price to be paid if for an existing business, B. Assets to be purchased if for a new business, and C. Cost of formation working capital. 2. The promoters approach financiers with a view to share underwriting. 3. Solicitor prepares any contracts in connection with the registration of the company. Such documents include the Memorandum and Articles of Association. Memorandum of Association. This document is the company's charter and defines the limits of the company's powers. If the company operates outside the powers stipulated in this document, it is said to act ultra vires, that is, beyond its powers. The action can then be declared null and void by a court of law. The memorandum must be signed by each of the applicants, who must also write, opposite his name, the number of shares he has agreed to take. According to the Act, the memorandum should contain the following information. 1. The name of the company with the word limited as the last word of its name, unless the registrar of companies exempts the company from using the word, being satisfied that it is to be formed for the purpose of promoting commerce, art, science, religion, charity, or any other useful object, and such a company will not pay any dividends to its members. No 2 companies may be registered with the same name. 2. Where the registered office is situated. Here, the country, state, or local government where the head office is situated must be stated. This is to facilitate communication between the company and the public. Any change must be communicated to the registrar of companies. 3. The objects for which the company is formed. The objects of the company define its powers. It is only what is stated here that a company may legally be engaged in. The object clause helps the prospective shareholders to know what business the company will be in and also help potential customers to know the limits of the company's powers. 4. That the liability of the members is limited. The memorandum must state clearly that the liability of shareholders is limited. The liability refers to the debts or losses of the company, and a shareholder is not liable for this beyond the amount of share capital he has contributed or agreed to contribute in the business. For instance, a shareholder who has agreed to contribute or has contributed 300 naira will only lose this amount in the event of liquidation. However, If he has made payment up to any amount in the called up capital, say 200 naira, he will only be required to pay the balance of 100 naira in the event of the company winding up. This perhaps has made joint stock companies as a business form very popular in recent years. Many people prefer taking up ventures whose magnitude of loss is known in advance. 5. The amount of the share capital with which the company proposes to be registered and the division thereof into shares of a fixed amount. Every company must state its authorized nominal capital in the memorandum. The accounts will depend upon the nature of the business and prospect of development. Each fixed amount is called a share. B. Articles of Association. The articles set out the regulations regarding the transfer and transmission of shares, the holding of meetings, calls and forfeiture of shares, powers, duties and proceedings of directors, and so on. The articles are subordinated to and controlled by the Memorandum of Association. The Memorandum and Articles of Association, along with the other documents mentioned above, are filed with the Registrar of Companies. If after due scrutinization, the registrar found the documents all right, especially if they do not contravene the Companies and Allied Matters Act, a certificate of incorporation will be issued. The certificate brings the company into existence and it can now raise capital, borrow money, and enter into contracts. Public limited companies will, however, receive a further certificate entitling it to commence business. Let's take a pause at this point and take an activity. Take careful note at both Memorandum of Association and Articles of Association. Can you spot any difference? Write them down on a piece of paper and share with your friends and colleagues. You can also create a group discussion on this. Financing. Quite unlike the sole trader and partnership, a lot of sources of funds are open to a public limited company. All the known sources of short, medium and long-term funds are available to the joint stock companies, and you will learn them in detail when we will treat sources of funds in the next module. Advantages. Limited liability companies derive some advantages which other forms of business organizations do not. Limited liability is one of the advantages. Shareholders in a joint stock company enjoy limited liability. Their liabilities are limited to the amount of shares or unpaid portion of the amount of shares they have taken. This is born out of the second advantage, which is of legal entity. Legal entity. The business is a legal entity, meaning that it has independent and separate existence from the shareholders. It can sue and be sued with its name apart from the names of the shareholders. This implies that the company contracts on its own, and should it fail, the shareholders will only lose their contributions. A third advantage is expanded financial capability. Joint stock companies are said to be associations of capital and not of persons. Shareholders who contribute large sums own them. More money could be borrowed at will because the company can afford the collateral/security required for borrowing. Besides, the company could raise an additional amount through the issue and sale of shares. There are quite a lot of other sources of finance available to this type of business. Another advantage is unlimited scope for expansion. Because of expanded financial capability, joint stock companies can afford to expand. Besides, the liability of a shareholder is limited. Therefore, the board of directors is given free hand to expand or contract the business as the situation demands. As a result of increased operation, joint stock companies reap the economies of large-scale production. Continuity is another advantage. Joint stock companies are legal entities and therefore can survive beyond the death of any shareholder. The company has separate existence. A dead member's share could be resold to another person who is interested. Specialization in management is another advantage. Joint stock company provides careers for men of high managerial and administrative acumen. The company can easily obtain and pay specialized management staff. Experts in various fields like production, marketing, finance, and so on are employed to man the various positions. This is quite unlike the sole proprietorship, where the owner is the manager in every line of activity. One final advantage we will mention here is that employees may become co-owners. In companies, it is possible for employees to buy shares. In fact, it is highly recommended nowadays that about 30% of the shares be sold to employees. This will help to elicit more commitment to the company's objectives from employees. This is because they will be working for their wages and salaries and at the same time waiting to collect dividend by the end of the year, perhaps even bonus, which is a function of the net profit. Box 3.1. Difference between Article of Association and Memorandum. The article set out the regulations regarding the transfer and transmission of shares, the holding of meetings, calls and forfeiture of shares, powers, duties and proceedings of directors, and so on. The articles are subordinated to and controlled by the Memorandum of Association, while Memorandum of Understanding is the company's charter and defines the limits to the company's powers. If the company operates outside the powers stipulated in this document, it is said to act ultra vires, that is, beyond its powers. The action can then be declared null and void by a court of law. Now let's take a look at the disadvantages of joint stock company. This form of business organization suffers some disadvantages. 1. Lack of privacy. The financial statements of the company are open for public inspection, quite unlike unincorporated business forms. 2. Separation of ownership from control. Shareholders can only exercise control over the business through the appointment of the board of directors. Unfortunately, they are scattered all over the country and therefore not all of them are able to attend the annual general meetings. They vote by proxy. Member of partnership and sole proprietorship control their own businesses. 3. Conflict of interest between the shareholders and directors. There may exist conflict of interest when, for instance, shareholders would like to expand the company, but the directors will be content with the present size of operation. They may not like to plunge into risky ventures for fear of failing. Such risky ventures may hold promise of huge profits, but the directors would shy away. Other areas of conflict may be in retaining more profit than paid out by way of dividends to shareholders. Shareholders need dividend, while the directors may want to plow the profit back into the business for expansion. 4. Suppression of individual initiative. There is no room for shareholders to put their initiative into practice, quite unlike the sole traders and partnerships. This is because not only that ownership is separated from control, but the fact that management is centralized at the top. In most organizations, the administration is centralized. In others, it is decentralized. Except in limited cases where employees own shares in the organization, the employment of initiative in centralized organizations is limited. Another disadvantage is the absence of cordial relationship among workers, customers, shareholders, and employers. This is because companies employ thousands of workers and the managers are far away from the employees and customers. In-text question. Let's take a pause here. A young business management student has approached you and asked to help him explain the term legal entity and the implication in business. How would you explain this considering we have been making reference to it? Answer. Legal entity means legal person. In business, it means that the business is separate from the owners and can sue or be sued in its own name, own property, and enter into legal agreements and so on. Public corporation. Nigeria is a mixed economic system in which public and private enterprises coexist. The proportion of the two has, however, varied, especially within the past 25 years. Since the end of World War II, the public sector has been widening, largely as a result of increasing state enterprises through the establishment of public corporations and other state-owned enterprises as agencies of economic and social development. Public corporations were previously government departments up to World War II. Examples are the Nigerian Railroad Corporation, which grew out of Nigerian Railway Department, the Nigerian Port Authority that was formed out of the old Marine Department also. Public corporation is the most important form of public business enterprises. They are created by special acts of parliament and given a legal personality from that of the government. As a body corporate, they can sue and be sued in their own names and can enter into contracts. Some of them are now partially or fully privatized and or commercialized or about to be privatized. Government divested its holding due to a lot of reasons bordering on inefficiency, embezzlement and corruption. The Nigerian Coal Corporation is dead. The Port Authority is commercialized. Nigerian Electric Power Authority is privatized and commercialized, and so on. Financing. The financing then came from budgetary allocations and borrowing. After privatization and commercialization, they are financed privately by their stakeholders. Advantages of public corporation. Public corporation is a surrogate to public limited companies where, by virtue of its limited resources of both men, material and money, cannot undertake certain economic ventures like the railways. Besides, left to private hands, monopolies of the highest order will emerge and the public would be exploited. Also, since it is the duty of the government to provide the infrastructure base and all the support for industrial takeoff, public cooperation oriented towards solving this problem is indispensable to the economic development of the nation. Disadvantages of public cooperation. However, its major drawback is that the management is usually left in the hands of seasoned crooks and fraudulent individuals whose tribalistic tendencies aid inefficiencies in various ways. Nigeria has sometimes invited foreign enterprises to come and manage corporations that seem to remain sick babies in the hands of Nigerian managers. For instance, Nigerian Railway Corporation was managed by an Indian firm, Nigeria Airways by Dutch Airlines, and so on. Let's take an activity here. Take a colossal look at Nigeria. How do you think that commercialization as well as privatization would benefit us? Write this out on paper and discuss the points with your friends. This activity is allowed for 2 hours. Cooperative society. A cooperative society may be defined as a self-help organization formed either by consumers or producers. It is formed to provide services to the members. They are common in agriculture and retail distribution and in rural credit and insurance. There are no particular formalities for the formation. It may be written, oral, or implied from the conduct of the parties. Membership is voluntary and open to all persons, and members are free to leave when they wish. A number of people may combine to produce a commodity and share the proceeds among members. Others may combine as consumers and obtain goods on wholesale terms and retail them to members. Any surplus is distributed to members in the form of dividends on purchases. Types of cooperatives. Consumer cooperatives. Members of this cooperative buy consumer goods in bulk and at wholesale prices and sell at retail prices to members and non-members. The share of profit depends on the amount of patronage received from each of the members. Credit and loan cooperatives. This is a type of isusu that is very popular in the towns and villages. It may be in form of daily collections, weekly or monthly rotational savings. Members use this medium to save, and part of the savings are given to needy members as loans at lower interest rates. Producers cooperative. People in a particular line of production come together to form this type of cooperative. It is very common among farmers, as you used to hear about farmers' multipurpose cooperative societies. Management. Members elect a management committee to manage its affairs. Every member has an equal vote and can stand for election. Advantages. The advantages of cooperative are: 1. It encourages members to save. 2. Increase output. 3. Provides capital for economic development. 4. Increase the income of members. 5. Provide facilities for easy and marketing of products. And 6. Enable farmers to buy capital equipment and so on. Disadvantages. The chief drawbacks are management of funds by management committee, illiteracy on the part of members, and the fact that they use their money to sponsor candidates during elections, thereby leading to wastages of investable funds, which could have been more productively utilized. Financing. The members of Producers Cooperative contribute nearly all the finance, either by subscription, contribution, and retained profit, or, in the case of Consumers Cooperative, credit purchases. Producers cooperatives in the agricultural field obtain finance through leasing, grants from the government, and borrowing from relevant financial institutions. These sources of finance depend on the strength and cooperation of the members. Financing. The members of cooperative contribute nearly all the finance, either by subscriptions, contributions, and retained profit, or in the case of Consumers Cooperative, credit purchases. Producers cooperative in the agricultural field obtain finance through leasing, grants from the government, and borrowing from relevant financial institutions. These sources of finance depend on the strength and cooperation of the members. Session summary. In this study session, You have learned that 1. A public limited company is a legal person or entity created by the association of a number of persons in accordance with the law for the purpose of a defined object. 2. The articles set out the regulations regarding the transfer and transmission of shares, the holding of meetings, calls and forfeiture of shares, powers, duties, and proceedings of directors, and so on in a joint stock company or public limited liability company. 3. Public corporations are created by special acts of parliament and given a legal personality from that of the government. 4. After privatization and commercialization, public corporations are financed privately by their stakeholders. And 5. Cooperative society are self-help organizations formed either by consumers or producers. Self-assessment questions (SAQs). As you have now completed this session, answer the following questions to see how far you have achieved its learning objectives. SAQ 3.1. With reference to their formation modes, differentiate joint stock companies from public corporations and cooperative societies. SAQ 3.2. With keen interest on how they get their finances, differentiate joint stock companies from public corporations and cooperative societies. SAQ 3.3. What makes joint stock companies preferable to cooperative societies and public corporations? Further references and readings can be found in your online manual. Some of the references are Paish F.W. and Briston R.J. 1978, Business Finance; Pandey I.M. 1999, Financial Management; Omar P.N. 1993, Principles of Finance; Okoro OEU 2009, Introduction to Banking and Finance. And this is the end of Module 1.